everyone, this is Kelsey and this is Essentially Book. Thank you so much for stopping by my channel today. Today we are going to do my November reading wrap up. I felt like I had a slow reading month. Like I don't feel like I read a lot of books, but I did. I read 9 books. Normally I'm reading like 12, so it's really not that bad of a month, right? I read some really good books though, and some very like heavy books, so it makes sense that I read less in November. I had a pretty outstanding reading month when I'm looking at what I've read. I got quite a few arcs read. I got some book of the months off my shelf, which was really exciting. Got some of my NetGalley books up. I have embarked on the Throne of Glass journey and I am fully committed, very deep into it, even though I've only read 2 books so far. And of course, Iron Flame. Like, that happened. So quite a month, quite an exciting reading month, but also I just felt like it was a slower month because I didn't read as many books, but I read books of quality. And you know, all this stuff is subjective as a reader. Like it's a great reading month, all things considered. So I'm gonna start in the lowest ranking to the highest ranking. I rated no books below 3 stars, so everything is 3 stars or above. And let's just get right into this. Okay, because I already mentioned it, I gave Iron Flame 3 stars. I did a whole video on this, so you can watch that video. I'm gonna put it up there. It read like 2 different books. I think it should have been divided into 2 books, and there were very clear places where the book just wasn't edited. I did learn something pretty interesting on a podcast. It was from Sarah's Bookshelves Live. She was doing a State of the Industry podcast, and it was super interesting because Rebecca Yarros was never going to write this book. A publisher approached her to write these books. So it's called like indie published books or indie pick books, I think. And they reach out to authors. Publishers will come up with this idea. They will approach an author to write that idea for them. So that's how this whole series even started, which I didn't know that. I thought that was really interesting. The ending of this book, like the last like 30 pages is very ridiculous. Ridiculous is not a good word. The last 30 pages of this book are very intense and you're just like along for the ride. And there were moments in this book where it was so much fun and I loved it. It just read like 2 different books. I felt like so much more was poured into the first half, and then the second half was just a wild ride, and I wish there were things that she like went more into. And like in hindsight, I had so much fun reading this, so I'm not knocking it. It just was a 3-star read for me. I'm gonna keep reading the series. Like there's no way I'm not gonna do that. I did score a copy of the special edition Fourth Wing, which I'm pretty excited about. So 3 stars. And then I also talked about this, but Crown of Midnight, read that. I will also say that it was a 3-star read. It was really slow for like the first half. And I just was like kind of dragging to pick it up, but then the back half really picked up. And it helped that my friend Marty is doing a read along of this. I actually left the chat because I'm way behind. And they started with the Assassin's Blade, then they read Throne of Glass, and then Crown of Midnight, and I'm reading it in the order where you read Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, the Assassin's Blade. And so I think, because I'm reading the Assassin's Blade right now, I wish I had read the Assassin's Blade first, because there are a lot of backstory to Selena, that I think I would have found a lot more value of in this book specifically. But this book ends on such a cliffhanger that I am just super ready to dive in. And I know in December I will probably finish I will finish the Assassin's Blade, and then I hope to read The Heir of Fire next. So 3-star read, super fun. Sarah J. Maas is just the best. All right, and then I did get a 3-star book of the month book off my shelf, and that is The Nest by Cynthia Dupree Sweeney. I have had this book on my shelf. This is one of the first book of the months I think I ever bought, and I want to say it was published before Book of the Month did like their standard size books that are like more along like this, you know how they have the logo up in the top and they're all like the same size. This is not, and I thought like this is an old book month. That's how long I've been a member of Book of the Month, you guys. And it doesn't even have really the logo. It's down here. So this was published in 2016. This is like families behaving badly, family drama, which is my kryptonite. I love it. This family they live in New York City. They're all like 4 siblings, super wealthy, but they have a trust, and the trust is about to be paid out to them. However, they have one brother who like gets into this drunk driving accident and injures somebody, and a lot of the money is used to pay those legal fees. And each of these siblings have money problems, family problems, and they kind of are all like coming together, dealing with their grievances, but also just coming together as a family. And I really, really liked it. It was great on audio. I just like deep dives into family dynamics, and I think this book was really great for that. But I gave it 3 stars because there were just parts that I was not interested in picking the book up. And that for me is a telltale sign that it's like an okay one. I ended up grabbing it on audio, and then that helped me get through it more. So 3 stars, but I did get one of my oldest book of the month books off my shelf, which you know is one of my goals for the year, so I'm pretty excited about that. All right, now we're gonna go into 4-star reads, and I had one on my Kindle. It's A Winter in New York by Josie Silver. I will be talking about this later in December, so I'm not really gonna go into a lot of detail. But Josie Silver, I just think is a great, not even rom-com. Her books usually are heavier. But again, this book deals with grief, which is something that works for me really well. And there's a romance, and there's food writing, and I just had a lot of fun with it. And so that's one of the books I read in December that I just really enjoyed for a romance. And that was 4 stars. And then I read The Hacienda. This was actually the very first book I finished in November, and it was a spin-over from Spookopoly. A rollover, not a spin-over. By Isabel Camas. And this is a gothic haunted house, like family dysfunction, historical fiction. It just has all these things that I loved in it. And the horror is actually like really creepy. I wasn't expecting it to be as creepy as it was, but there are things that like, there were a few times I couldn't read this after 8 p.m. because it was just too scary. And it's not like terrible, but it just had its moments. So this is about a girl named Beatriz who her father was executed during the Mexican War of Independence. And because of like where her father fell in history, like after he dies, like she becomes kind of an outcast, her and her mother. So she marries a wealthy man who lives out in the country in this secluded castle thing. And quickly, like as she's there, there's just a vibe that is just so off about this house. And quickly the house starts like haunting her. And she finds out that there's a lot to the past in this family and in this house. And the house remembers things. The house is like magical in a sense. And the house is just something else and really like takes a fixation on her to the next level. There's a priest that is like servicing this area that grew up on this like land, and he and her kind of have like a romance, but he also knows the history of the family, and they're trying to break this curse on this house. And it is just a really fun book, and her writing is so good. I have Vampires of El Norte on my phone through Libby, so I'm excited to get into that because I did really, really enjoy this one. All right, and then it was Historathon this year or this month, and so I read Crow Mary as the group read for that. And I have read The Kitchen House by Kathleen Grissom, which is a really, really good book about a woman in slavery. I just remember how immersive that was and how much she made me feel. And this book is no different. I gave this 4 stars. It was slow in parts, and some of the dialogue, like the voice of some of the characters, I just couldn't connect with, but it was overall an incredible book. It's based on a real woman named Crow Mary, and she marries a fur trader. And this takes place in like the northern Dakotas, kind of southern Canada. And she marries this fur trader, and they build a fort, and like he is just known to be very compassionate and kind. It's like a sweeping love story and historical fiction. The things she's experienced are just atrocious, and this is definitely like Manifest Destiny time, like where the US is stealing land from our indigenous people and saying it goes to the white people, and like forcing them from the only places they've known. The buffalo go extinct, and this, like, you're seeing that all that stuff happen. A lot of white men feel like they're entitled to the women around them and all of that, and they're building this lodge up in like Canada. And she witnesses a massacre of a native tribe. She ends up rescuing like 5 or 6 women who were like falsely imprisoned from this tribe who have been abused. She like gets them to freedom, and then they try to bring the white men to justice. And she's married to a white man, and so you get like this tense dynamic between them. You get like a picture of the justice system at this time and how obviously it's not sculpted or meant for indigenous people. And it's just super well done. It was really, I'm on a easy 4-star read. I really did like it. There were just parts that I just didn't jive. It was mainly the main character's voice. And the cool thing is, so Kathleen Grissom is a white woman, and that would bring me pause to normally read it because I think Indigenous stories should be told by Indigenous people. However, She has a close relationship with Crow Mary's descendants, and they've approved of all of this. They worked with her very closely in writing this book, and so that kind of helped me get over that hurdle. And I just thought this was really tastefully done, really well done. And her author's note is really worth reading at the end, just to kind of get an insight into how she wrote this to respect our Indigenous people and the atrocities that have been committed. I really did like this, so it was a 4-star read. And then my final 4-star read of the month was The Future by Naomi Alderman. And I was graciously sent this by the publisher, and then it also happened to be the Dog-Eared Book subscription for this month. And this book is like a lot of things in one. It's kind of sci-fi, dystopian, definitely climate fiction. So the world is real bad. Climate is just crumbling. Technology and AI are huge. And you're following these 2 women who work closely with like the largest tech companies. So think like a Facebook or an Amazon. The owners of these companies have made bunkers so that when the end of the world comes, they will go to their bunkers and let everything happen up above, and then they will be safe. And they don't care about anybody else in the world, essentially. They have a few people that will go with them, and these 2 women kind of work to undermine this, but it's so much more than that. It's kind of a heist novel, but I just could not put it down, and it was just fascinating. It makes you really think about like the ethics of social media and AI, but in a way that it's not like too heavy-handed. It's super inclusive. There's just so much in this that I really did enjoy. And I will say, like, how it unraveled at the end totally surprised me. And it was just a wild ride. Now, I do want to read The Power, but this is like a heavier read. It takes more brain power than like a lot of books. And so I need a break before I go into The Power, because I do have that as a book of the month book. But I am really glad that I picked this up. It was so good. And I have been thinking about it quite a bit, to the point that it might get bumped up to a 5-star read. I just need to do some more thinking on it. So that's The Future by Naomi Alderman. All right, and then for my 2 5-star reads of the month, I read Love and Saffron by Kim Fay, and this was sent to me by Fabled when I did their book box subscription last year. And this is a super short novel. It's epistolary. It's following 2 women. One lives in like Southern California, one lives in Washington or Oregon. I think it's Washington. And they both write. And through their columns, they discover each other. They exchange like penmanship, and you just get back and forth letters of them as they're talking about their like daily lives and the food that they're eating and exposing each other to different food. There's a romance in here. There's things that will make you cry. It was just a lovely read, and I read it the day before Thanksgiving, which was a perfect time to read a book that centers around food, family, and love. If you're just looking for a simple, short book to sink your teeth into, to just kind of like appreciate the power of writing and friendship and food, I would definitely recommend this. This was one of those books that like hit me at that perfect time, so it was a no-brainer 5-star read, and it was just lovely. It takes place in the 60s too, which I just thought was a fun dynamic. Like Kennedy is shot during this book, so you even see some of that like current event type stuff in there. It was just a wonderful, wonderful read. And then my final 5-star book actually does not even come out until 2023, and it is a book that I read for Historathon. I read The Women by Kristen Hanna. Easiest 5-star book I think I've ever read. She is one of my favorite authors, and she does no wrong. She's so good. So The Women follow women, a main character, who go, I think her name is Fanny. She decides to enlist because she's a nurse and goes overseas and for the Vietnam War. I admittedly know very little about the Vietnam War. I have an aunt whose brother passed away in Vietnam, but like other than that, that is all I really know. And I know that we didn't treat our soldiers well coming home. And this book puts you right into like the action, and you see how unplanned and not well designed our actions as the United States were in Vietnam. You see how utterly brutal that environment was. She holds no bars. There is a lot of like gore because she's a nurse, so you're in like, you know, first aid tents, you're in operating rooms, but just the number of people who died for something that wasn't that well thought out, and then how we treated people who came home afterwards is devastating. And this is before like PTSD was acknowledged. This is before we recognize the cost of war. And so when she comes home from war, there's a lot of like discussion on veterans' mental health. And she has like these two loves that happen in Vietnam, and they're both just brutally taken from her in a way. And so she reckons with like losing love and losing friends because it's this like absolutely deadly war. And when she comes back, nobody recognizes her. And furthermore, she's a woman, and everyone says there was no women in Vietnam, but here all of the nurses on the front line were women. So there's this whole like band of people. There's all the soldiers that are forgotten about and like treated like dirt, but then there's these women who aren't even acknowledged for going overseas and doing what they did. And Kristen Hanna just puts you in there, and you feel like so visceral. You just feel everything. And it put me in the biggest book hangover, you guys. So when it comes out in February, I highly, highly, highly recommend this book. I could not put it down, and just the like atrocities. And so now I'm like, if you know of any books that are set in the Vietnam era and are like educational or fiction, I want to read them, because I know very little. Like, I wasn't really taught about a lot about it, because it was, I think, such a unfortunate war that we were in that we probably shouldn't have ever been in to begin with. We weren't taught about it, and I think it's just because there wasn't, like, it's a dark time in our history. So if you know anything about Vietnam or have any recommendations, I would love to hear them, because this book was that good and really made me so curious to learn more. Those are the 9 books I read in November. I had a great month, and I'm just super happy with all the books that I read. December is shaping up to be just as good of a month, I hope. And like I said, if you have any recommendations for Vietnam War books, I would love to hear them. And if you've made it to the end of the video, please drop a Christmas tree emoji down in the comments, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, everybody.